In the summer of 2012, on a busy Saturday morning in the small town of Elmwood, Vermont, a man named Daniel Hayes was crossing the central square when a single word sliced through the noise of weekend shoppers and street musicians. The word wasn't loud, it wasn't shouted, it was spoken in a calm, almost casual tone by a stranger passing in the opposite direction, a woman in her late 40s, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed ahead as if she were deep in conversation with someone far away. The word was taro. Daniel froze mid-step. People bumped into him, muttered apologies, kept moving. But for Daniel, the world narrowed to that one syllable, taro. It wasn't a common name. It wasn't even real, not in the way most names are. It was the secret name his 6-year-old son William had given to an invisible companion when he was just 4. A companion who lived under the porch swing, who liked apple slices and hated loud noises. Only Daniel and William had ever known about taro. William had whispered the name like a treasure only when the two of them were alone. The woman didn't stop. She didn't glance at Daniel. She simply continued walking, her voice steady on the phone. Then she said something else, quiet, matter-of-fact, as though it were part of the same call. "You'll see him again, but you won't know who told you." She turned the corner by the old bookstore and vanished into the flow of people heading toward the farmer's market. Daniel stood there, heart hammering against his ribs. His hands felt cold despite the July heat. Had she been speaking to him? Or had his mind, worn thin by 8 years of searching, hoping, and slowly accepting the worst, finally cracked open and started inventing messages from strangers? He spun around, scanned the crowd. No sign of her, no unusual face, no hurried retreat. Just families with strollers, teenagers on skateboards, an old man feeding pigeons. Normal Saturday life in Elmwood. But nothing felt normal anymore. Daniel walked the rest of the way home in a daze, the same sidewalks he'd paced 1,000 times since 2004, the same quiet streets where he'd once pushed William in a stroller, laughing at how the boy would wave at every passing dog. Now those streets felt like echoes, empty. He let himself into the small house on Cedar Lane, the one he'd never been able to sell because every room still carried the shape of his son. William's drawings were still taped to the fridge, faded crayon pictures of dinosaurs and spaceships. A single photo of the two of them at the county fair sat on the mantel, William grinning with cotton candy stuck to his cheek, Daniel ruffling his dark hair. Daniel sank into the armchair by the window and stared at nothing. Taro. How could anyone know that name? William had invented it after watching a cartoon about a magical fox. He'd insisted Taro was shy, only came out when no one else was looking. Daniel had played along, setting out tiny plates of snacks on the porch. It was their secret game. No one else knew. Unless... He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the contact for Detective Maria Reyes, the woman who'd led the original investigation. He hesitated. How many times had he called her over the years with new leads that turned out to be nothing? A boy who looked similar in a mall 2 states away, a tip from a psychic, a dream that felt too real. But this wasn't a dream. This was a voice, a name, a promise. He dialed. "Daniel?" Reyes answered on the second ring. Her voice was tired but kind, the way it always was with him. "Everything okay?" Something happened today," he said. His throat felt tight. "In the square, a woman walked past me. She said, 'Taro.' Then she said I'd see him again, but I wouldn't remember her." Silence on the line. Then, "Taro?" "It was William's imaginary friend. He made it up when he was 4. No one knew that name except me and him. No one." Another pause. "You're sure that's what she said?" "I'm sure." "Okay, stay there. I'm coming over." While he waited, Daniel replayed the moment again and again.
The woman's tone hadn't changed. No eye contact, no pause, just 2 sentences dropped like stones into still water, then gone. When Detective Reyes arrived, she listened without interrupting. Daniel told her everything, the exact words, the direction she'd walked, the fact that she'd been on the phone the whole time. Reyes took notes, asked gentle questions. Had she seen her face clearly? Any accent? Clothing? Anything distinctive? Not much. Average height, dark hair pulled back, jeans, light jacket, nothing that stood out in a crowd. Reyes leaned forward. Daniel, if this is real, if someone knows something, they're being careful, very careful. That means they're scared too. Scared of what?
Of being seen, of what happens if they speak openly. She closed her notebook. I'll pull the old file, look at witness statements again, see if anything matches this delivery method. But in the meantime, don't chase this alone. If someone left you a breadcrumb, there might be more. Daniel nodded, but inside he was already turning over possibilities. Hope, sharp and dangerous, had woken up after 8 long years of sleep. 8 years earlier, June 2004. Elmwood, Vermont. William Hayes was 4 years old, small for his age, with wide, curious eyes and a laugh that could make strangers smile from across the street. He and Daniel lived in the little house on Cedar Lane, just the two of them, since William's mother had passed away from complications after his birth. Daniel worked as a mechanic at the garage on Route 7, came home every evening smelling of oil and metal, but always made time to play, read stories, build forts out of couch cushions. That Saturday was warm, the kind of day that pulls kids outside. William was in the backyard, fenced, safe, playing with his collection of plastic dinosaurs. Daniel was in the garage tinkering with an old motorcycle he'd promised to fix for a neighbor. The garage door was open. He could hear William narrating an epic battle. "Taro, you have to hide! The big T-Rex is coming!" Daniel smiled to himself. Taro again, the invisible fox who'd recently learned to fly, according to William. Daniel stepped inside to grab a wrench. 30 seconds, maybe 45. When he came back out, the backyard was empty. The dinosaurs lay scattered on the grass. A half-eaten apple sat on the picnic table. The gate at the far end of the fence, usually latched, was standing open. Daniel's stomach dropped. "William?" he called. No answer. He ran to the gate, looked up and down the alley. Nothing. "William!" He sprinted around the house, checked the front yard, the porch, the street, called the boy's name until his voice cracked. Neighbors came out. Someone called 911. Within minutes, Elmwood's small police force was there, officers spreading out, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen a little boy in a green T-shirt and shorts. Daniel stood in the driveway, shaking, explaining to Detective Reyes, then just a sergeant, what had happened, how he'd only been inside for a moment, how William never wandered off, how he knew better than to go with strangers. Reyes listened, calm and focused. She organized search teams, brought in dogs, set up roadblocks on the main routes out of town. Volunteers arrived with flashlights, even though it was still daylight. But the scent trail ended at the curb 2 houses down. Tire tracks in the soft dirt, possibly from a minivan or SUV. Then nothing. Door-to-door interviews began immediately. Most neighbors had been inside, watching TV, napping, cooking dinner. No one had seen anything unusual. Except one person. Across the alley, in the house with the blue shutters, lived Margaret Cole, a 58-year-old retired librarian who rarely left her home. She suffered from intense social anxiety, hadn't set foot beyond her porch in nearly 3 years. She spent her days reading by the back window, watching the quiet comings and goings of the neighborhood like a silent documentary. That afternoon, Margaret had seen a dark-colored SUV pull slowly into the alley. 2 people got out, a man and a woman, both in casual clothes, but something about them felt rehearsed.
The man carried a clipboard, wore a polo shirt with what looked like a small logo on the chest, perhaps a local charity or utility company, the kind of thing that makes people lower their guard. Margaret watched as the man walked to the fence line, leaned over, spoke softly to William. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw William look up, curious, then smile. The man said something else. William nodded, stood, and walked toward the open gate. Margaret's breath caught. This wasn't right. She knew Daniel. She knew William belonged in that yard. She should have shouted, run to the door, called out. But the fear hit like a wave, fear of the stranger seeing her, fear of leaving the safety of her house, fear that if she acted, something worse would happen. Her heart raced so hard she thought she might faint. The woman opened the back door of the SUV. The man gently lifted William inside. William didn't struggle. He looked excited, like he was going on an adventure. Then the man glanced up, straight toward Margaret's window. Their eyes met for half a second. He didn't frown, didn't threaten. He simply raised one finger to his lips. Shh. Then he pointed once at the house number nailed to her porch post. A clear message, I see you, I know where you live. The SUV pulled away quietly, less than 2 minutes from start to finish. Margaret backed away from the window, sank to the floor, and cried. She had just watched a child being taken, and she had done nothing. When police knocked on her door later that evening, Margaret cracked it open just enough to speak. She told them she hadn't seen anything. She'd been reading in the front room. She was sorry. The officer thanked her and left.
Margaret closed the door, locked it, and returned to her window. She watched the flashing lights, the search teams, Daniel pacing the driveway with his head in his hands. She watched it all, and the guilt settled into her bones like lead. She told herself she had no choice. If she spoke, they might come back. They knew her house. They knew her face. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had chosen silence over a child's safety, and she would carry that choice every day for the next 8 years. Margaret Cole did not leave her house again for a very long time. After that Saturday in June 2004, the world outside her blue-shuttered home on the alley became something distant and dangerous. She stopped going to the small grocery store 2 blocks away, the one where she used to buy tea and paperback mysteries. She arranged for delivery instead, boxes left on the porch, paid for with cash slipped under the door for the driver. She canceled her library card renewals by phone, asked them to mail her holds if possible. Eventually, even that felt too risky. She read the books she already owned, over and over, until the pages felt soft from handling. Her days settled into a rhythm designed for invisibility. Mornings, coffee at the kitchen table, staring at the wall calendar she never changed past 2003. Afternoons, sitting by the back window with the curtains parted just enough to see without being seen. Evenings, the television on low, news she barely absorbed, then bed by 9. But every single day without fail, she watched Daniel Hayes. She watched him come home from the garage, shoulders slumped a little more each year. Watched him mow the lawn even when the grass was barely growing, as if keeping the yard perfect might somehow bring William back to play in it. Watched him put up new flyers every spring, faded color copies of William's school photo, the one with the gap-toothed smile, and take the old ones down when the tape gave out or the rain blurred the ink. She watched hope harden into something quieter, something more like habit than belief. And every day the guilt pressed heavier. Margaret told herself the same story she'd told herself in 2004. If I speak, they come back. They know my house number. They saw my face. They'll finish what they started. Better one child lost than 2 lives ended. But the logic never quite held.
because the man with the clipboard hadn't looked murderous. He looked calm, professional, like someone who did this kind of thing regularly and knew exactly how to make silence stick. Still, she stayed quiet. Years passed. In 2008, the town held a small candlelight vigil on the 4th anniversary. Margaret watched from her window as 30 or 40 people gathered in the square, holding paper lanterns. Daniel stood in the center, spoke a few words she couldn't hear, then lit his own lantern and let it rise with the others. She cried that night, not loud sobs, but the silent kind that leave your chest aching. In 2010, a national news segment featured cold cases from small towns. William's photo appeared on screen for 12 seconds. Margaret turned the volume up so high the neighbors probably heard it through the wall. The reporter said the case remained open, that tips could still be called in anonymously. Margaret stared at the phone on her kitchen counter for almost an hour. Her hand hovered over the receiver once, twice, and she walked away and turned off the television. She told herself, "If I call now, after 6 years, they'll ask why I waited. They'll want to know why I lied to the first officer. They'll dig, and if those people find out I spoke..." The fear won again. By 2011, Margaret's world had shrunk to 4 rooms: kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom. She lost weight. Her hair went fully gray. She spoke aloud sometimes just to hear a human voice, short conversations with the characters in her books, or apologies whispered to the empty air. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry, William. I was afraid." No one answered. Then came February 2012. Margaret was watching the evening news, her one remaining tether to the outside world, when a breaking story interrupted the local weather forecast. Federal agents had raided a compound in upstate New York. 16 arrests, a long-running network that specialized in private placements, a polite phrase for kidnapping young children and selling them to couples desperate for a family. The ring had been active since the late 1990s, possibly earlier. They used fake credentials, charity workers, home safety inspectors, even clergy in some cases. They targeted quiet neighborhoods, single parents, moments when adults were distracted for just a minute or two. The screen showed grainy security footage from one of the raided offices, filing cabinets being opened, computers seized, stacks of forged birth certificates. Then a photograph appeared, a still image pulled from an old driver's license. The man was in his late 50s now, heavier than Margaret remembered, but the eyes were the same, calm, blank. He wore a polo shirt in the photo. The small logo on the chest was faded, but Margaret recognized the shape immediately, an emblem of a non-existent Children's Aid Foundation the ring had used in Vermont back in 2004.
Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it might bruise. She stood up, something she rarely did quickly anymore, and moved closer to the television. The reporter continued. Authorities believed the network had placed more than 60 children over 15 years. Many were still living with their adoptive families, unaware of their origins. Investigators were working to identify and reunite as many as possible. Margaret sat down again, hard. Her legs wouldn't hold her. William might be alive. Not buried somewhere, not gone forever. Alive. 12 years old now. Going to school, playing soccer, eating breakfast at someone else's table, thinking someone else was his mother or father. And she had known, had seen the faces responsible. For the next 3 weeks, Margaret barely slept. She paced the living room at night, lights off, replaying every possible outcome. If she went to the police now, they would ask questions, lots of questions. Why didn't you tell us in 2004? Why did you say you were in the front room?
Do you understand that your silence may have cost this boy 8 years of his real life? She imagined courtrooms, cameras, reporters on her porch, the man from the SUV, if he was still free, finding out she'd finally spoken. But she also imagined Daniel's face if William came home. She imagined a 12-year-old boy learning his real name wasn't the one he'd grown up with. She imagined herself finally stepping outside her own door, not as a witness hiding, but as someone who had done the right thing, however late. The fear didn't disappear, it never would, but something else grew stronger, the realization that silence had already cost her everything worth having: peace, sleep, self-respect. She couldn't go to the police station, couldn't face Detective Reyes in person, couldn't handle being seen, questioned, exposed. But she could give Daniel something, a push, a direction, enough truth to restart the search without her name ever attached. She spent 4 days writing the note. She wrote on plain printer paper, wearing gloves so there would be no fingerprints. She described the SUV, dark green, no plates visible from her angle. 2 people, man with clipboard and logo polo, woman driving. The hand signal, the pointed finger at her house number. The direction they drove, toward Route 7 north, out of town. She wrote an apology, short, honest.
I saw it happen. I was too afraid to speak then. I'm still afraid now. But your son may still be alive. Look for organizations using charity disguises. Look at recent federal cases in New York. I'm sorry it took so long. No signature, no return address. She folded the note, placed it in a plain white envelope. On the night of March 18, 2012, 8 years and 9 months after William disappeared, Margaret waited until 2:30 a.m. The street was silent. No cars, no porch lights on. She unlocked her front door for the first time in nearly 4 years. The cold air hit her like a slap. Her knees shook. She forced herself to step onto the porch, cross the small lawn, slip across the alley in the dark. She placed the envelope against Daniel's front door, under the mat so it wouldn't blow away. Then she hurried back, heart racing, breath short, locked her door, leaned against it, and slid to the floor. She had done it. Now she could only wait. The next morning, at 6:45 a.m., Daniel opened his door to leave for work. He almost stepped on the envelope. He picked it up, frowned. No stamp, no address, just his name handwritten on the front in careful block letters, Daniel Hayes. He tore it open right there on the porch, read the first line, then the second. Then he sat down hard on the top step, the note trembling in his hands. By 7:15, he was at the police station. Detective Maria Reyes met him in the lobby. She took one look at his face and knew something had changed. He handed her the envelope without a word. She read it slowly, twice, then she looked up. "This matches the method from the Main Street Whisper you told me about last summer. The careful wording, the anonymity. Someone's trying to help without being seen." Daniel's voice cracked. "They said he may still be alive." Reyes nodded. "We're going to treat this as credible. I'm calling the FBI liaison this morning. That New York case they mentioned on the news, it's big. If there's overlap, we'll find it." She put a hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, this doesn't mean we'll have him tomorrow, but it means we have a real direction for the first time in 8 years." He nodded, tears running freely now. Across the alley, from behind her curtain, Margaret watched Daniel drive away with Detective Reyes following in her unmarked car. She pressed her palm to the glass. For the first time in 8 years, she didn't feel quite so alone. William Hayes did not remember the day the dark green SUV pulled away from the alley behind his house.
He did not remember the man with the clipboard saying, "Your dad sent me to pick you up for a surprise trip." He did not remember climbing into the back seat without fear, thinking it was an adventure. He did not remember falling asleep against the window while the Vermont countryside blurred past, or waking up in a strange bedroom with posters of hockey players on the walls and a woman smiling down at him, saying, "Welcome home, Ethan." Those memories, if they ever fully formed, faded the way early childhood memories do, especially when someone works very hard to replace them. The people who became his new parents were named Mark and Laura Bennett. They lived in a tidy split-level house on the outskirts of Concord, New Hampshire, about 3 hours from Elmwood if you drove straight through. Mark was a high school history teacher. Laura worked part-time as a pediatric nurse. They had tried for years to have children. Fertility treatments, failed adoptions, endless waiting lists. Then, in the spring of 2004, a discreet contact from a private facilitation service reached out. They were told it would be fast, expensive, and completely confidential. They paid $42,000 in cash installments over 3 months. They were given forged documents, a birth certificate listing Ethan Bennett, born March 18, 2000, in Manchester, New Hampshire, medical records showing routine checkups, a short note from a supposed birth mother relinquishing rights. They wanted to believe it was real, so they did. When the 4-year-old boy arrived, quiet at first, clutching a small stuffed fox someone had given him during the handoff, they poured love into him like water on dry soil. They enrolled him in preschool that fall. They celebrated his 5th birthday with a backyard barbecue. They told him stories about how much they had wanted him, how he was their miracle. And slowly, Ethan Bennett began to believe that was who he was. But fragments lingered. He had recurring dreams, vague, half-remembered scenes that never quite connected. A backyard with a wooden swing, a man's voice laughing while pushing the swing higher, plastic dinosaurs lined up on grass, and always a name that floated just out of reach, Taro. In the dreams, Taro was sometimes a fox, sometimes just a feeling, a warm, invisible friend who made everything less lonely. Ethan would wake up with the name on his tongue, but when he tried to tell Laura about it, she would smile gently and say, "That's such a creative imagination you have, sweetie. Maybe Taro is your guardian angel." He learned not to ask too often.
By the time he was 8, the dreams came less frequently. School filled the empty spaces, friends, soccer practice, piano lessons, science fairs. He was good at math, quiet but kind, the kid who shared his lunch when someone forgot theirs. Teachers wrote thoughtful and observant on his report cards. The Bennetts were proud. They framed the honor roll certificates. But sometimes, in quiet moments, lying in bed before sleep or staring out the car window on long drives, Ethan felt a strange ache, like a missing tooth he couldn't stop touching with his tongue. He would think, "This is my house. These are my parents. This is my life." And yet some small, stubborn part of him whispered, "Wait, there's something else." He pushed the feeling down. Kids have imaginations. That's what everyone said. Meanwhile, in Elmwood, the investigation had quietly reignited. Detective Maria Reyes spent the weeks after Daniel received the anonymous note buried in files and databases. She coordinated with the FBI task force handling the New York raid. They sent her thousands of pages, transaction logs, burner phone records, lists of placements coded by date and state. Fake charity names popped up repeatedly: Helping Hands Network, Safe Futures Initiative, Children's Bridge Program. All of them used similar tactics: polo shirts with embroidered logos, clipboards, friendly approaches to distracted parents or unsupervised children. Reyes focused on June 2004, Vermont. Male child, age 4, blonde brown hair, taken from a backyard in a residential area. She found 3 possible matches in the ring's records for that month. The first, a boy placed in Massachusetts. Birth records checked out. Hospital had actual files. Eliminated. The second, a placement in Connecticut. School enrollment photos showed a child with darker features and a different build. Eliminated. The third, Ethan Bennett, placed with Mark and Laura Bennett in Concord, New Hampshire on June 22, 2004, 7 days after William disappeared. The paperwork was pristine on the surface, but the attending physician listed on the birth certificate had died in 1998. The hospital in Manchester had no record of any Ethan Bennett born in March 2000. The payment trail led back to a shell account linked to one of the arrested facilitators. Reyes stared at the grainy scanned photo attached to the file, a 4-year-old boy with wide eyes sitting on a plain background for what looked like an intake picture. The resemblance to William's last school photo was subtle but unmistakable. The shape of the jaw, the slight upward tilt of the eyebrows, the way the hair parted naturally on the left. She printed the photo, added it to a folder, and drove to Daniel's house that evening. Daniel opened the door before she knocked. He'd been watching from the window. She didn't waste time. "We have a strong candidate. New Hampshire, 12 years old now. Name on documents is Ethan Bennett." Daniel's knees buckled slightly. He gripped the doorframe. "Can I see?" She handed him the folder. He opened it with shaking hands, looked at the photo for a long time. "It's him. The eyes. It's William's eyes." Reyes spoke carefully. "We can't be certain yet. We need more. Surveillance first, quiet, no contact. Then, if it holds, we go for DNA." Daniel nodded, tears already falling. "How long?" "Days for initial photos, a week or two to build probable cause for a court order. We have to do this right, Daniel. If we move too fast and we're wrong, we traumatize an innocent kid and his family." "I know," but his voice cracked on the words. The surveillance began 3 days later.
A plainclothes officer from the New Hampshire State Police sat in an unmarked car outside Jefferson Elementary in Concord. He took photos from a distance. A 12-year-old boy with a backpack walking home with 2 friends, laughing at something one of them said. Another shot, Ethan on the soccer field after school, dribbling past a defender, focused and quick. A third, him sitting on the front steps of the Bennett house, eating an apple, talking to Laura while she watered flowers. Reyes showed the photos to Danielle in her office. He stared at each one for minutes. "The way he stands," Danielle said, "slight lean to the left, like he's always ready to run. William did that." "The smile," he added later, "when he looks up, it's the same." Reyes didn't argue. She felt it too. But feelings weren't evidence. She submitted the request for a DNA order. The anonymous note, the whisper on Main Street, the photo comparisons, the forged documents, the timeline match, the payment records. The judge reviewed it in chambers, granted it, conditional on minimal intrusion, presence of child psychologists, and notification to the current guardians only after the sample was collected. On April 12, 2012, 2 CPS workers and a therapist arrived at Jefferson Middle School during Ethan's science class. They spoke to the principal first, then asked Ethan to step into the counselor's office. Ethan was nervous. "Am I in trouble?" The therapist, a woman named Dr. Patel, smiled gently. "No, not at all. We just need to talk to you about something important. It won't take long." They sat at a round table. Ethan fidgeted with the zipper on his hoodie. Dr. Patel started slow. "Ethan, do you ever have memories or dreams from when you were really little, before kindergarten?" He shrugged. "Sometimes, not a lot." "Anything stand out?" He hesitated. "There's this fox thing, Taro. I used to dream about him a lot, like he was my friend." Dr. Patel nodded. "Taro, that's a cool name. Where do you think it came from?" "I don't know. Mom says it's just my imagination. The therapist exchanged a glance with the CPS worker. Ethan, we're looking into something that might mean you were placed with your family in a way that wasn't through regular channels. We think there might be another family who's been looking for a boy who disappeared around the time you were 4.
Ethan's face paled. You mean, like I was kidnapped? We don't know everything yet, Dr. Patel said softly. But we need to do a simple test, a cheek swab, to compare your DNA to someone who might be your biological father. It will tell us for sure. Ethan looked at the floor. Does that mean I have to leave Mom and Dad? No one is taking you anywhere today, the CPS worker promised. We just need the truth. Whatever happens next, we'll help you through it. You'll have support. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay. They swabbed his cheek, sealed the kit, thanked him, told him he could go back to class. That afternoon, Dr. Patel met with Mark and Laura Bennett at their home. They cried, they denied knowing anything illegal, they showed every document they had. They said they had been told it was a legitimate private adoption through a referral service they had never suspected. Detective Reyes, on speakerphone, explained the next steps. We wait for the lab, 3 to 5 days. In the meantime, please don't discuss this with Ethan beyond what the therapist has already said. We need to keep things calm for him. The Bennetts agreed. They were scared, angry, devastated, but they agreed. On April 17, 2012, the results came back. 99.97% probability of paternity. Daniel Hayes was Ethan's biological father, which meant Ethan Bennett was William Hayes. Reyes called Daniel at 10:14 a.m. He was at the garage under a car. He wiped his hands on a rag, answered on the 3rd ring. Daniel, she said, it's him. The DNA confirms it. William is alive. He's in Concord. He's safe. Daniel dropped the wrench. It clattered on the concrete. He didn't speak for almost a minute. Then, in a voice so small it barely carried, my boy. Reyes gave him time. Then, we'll arrange the first meeting carefully. Therapists will be there. It's going to take time. For him, for you, for everyone. But he's coming home, Daniel. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Daniel hung up the phone, walked out of the garage, sat on the curb, and cried like he hadn't cried in 8 years. Loud, wrenching sobs that made the other mechanics stop what they were doing and come outside. Across town, in her blue-shuttered house, Margaret Cole watched the evening news. They hadn't released names yet, but she saw the reporter standing outside the federal courthouse in Albany, saying that several children from the ring had now been identified and were in the process of being reunited. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Then she walked to her front window, the one she almost never used, and looked across the alley at Daniel's house. The porch light was on. For the first time in 8 years, it felt like hope lived there again. The first meeting was scheduled for May 3, 2012, at a neutral location, a small conference room in the Family Services Building in Concord, New Hampshire. Neutral walls, soft lighting, a round table with water bottles and tissues. No cameras, no rush. Therapists on both sides. Everyone agreed, slow, gentle, no pressure. Daniel arrived 40 minutes early. He wore a clean, button-down shirt, the one he usually saved for parent-teacher conferences that never happened again after 2004. His hands shook so badly he had to clasp them together to stop the trembling. Detective Reyes drove him. She waited in the hallway outside, giving him space. Dr. Patel, the therapist who had spoken with Ethan, met Daniel first. She explained the plan one more time. Ethan knows you're coming. He knows your name is Daniel Hayes. He knows the DNA says you're his biological father, but he doesn't remember you, not consciously. He's scared, confused,
Curious. He's asked a lot about you in the last 2 weeks. We'll let him set the pace. You follow his lead." Daniel nodded. His throat was too tight for words. Then the door opened. Ethan walked in first, taller than the surveillance photos suggested, 12 years old and already carrying the awkward lankiness of early adolescence. Dark jeans, gray hoodie, sneakers with frayed laces. His hair was the same color Daniel remembered, but longer now, falling over his forehead. He stopped just inside the doorway, eyes wide, scanning the room until they landed on Daniel. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Daniel stood slowly. He wanted to run to him, to hug him, to say everything he'd rehearsed in his head for 8 years, but he stayed still. "Hi, Ethan," Daniel said softly. His voice cracked on the name. "Or whatever you want me to call you." Ethan swallowed. "Hi." Dr. Patel gestured to the chairs. "You can sit wherever feels comfortable." Ethan chose the chair farthest from Daniel at first, then hesitated, moved one seat closer. Daniel sat too, leaving an empty chair between them. Silence stretched for a long moment. Ethan spoke first. "They showed me pictures from when I was little. You look the same, just older." Daniel managed a small smile. "You look different, but your eyes, they're the same." Ethan looked down at his hands. "I don't remember you. I'm sorry." "You don't have to be sorry," Daniel said quickly. "You were 4. That's a long time ago. And they took you away. It wasn't your fault, none of it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Mom, Laura, she said you've been looking for me all this time." "Every day." The words came out raw. "Every single day." Ethan's eyes filled. He blinked hard. I thought my parents were my parents. I thought that was normal. But now everything feels wrong, like I don't fit anymore."
Daniel leaned forward just a little. "You fit wherever you want to fit. You don't have to choose right now. You don't have to call me anything. You just have to know I never stopped. I never gave up. And I'm here now, for as long as you want me to be." Ethan wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Can I ask you something? Anything? What was I like before?" Daniel took a breath. "You were bright. You laughed at everything. You had this collection of plastic dinosaurs you'd line up on the grass and make them fight epic battles. You invented a friend named Taro, an invisible fox who lived under the porch swing. You'd set out little snacks for him, apple slices, crackers. You said he was shy." Ethan's head snapped up. "Taro." Daniel nodded. "You still remember him?" "I dream about him sometimes. I thought it was just a dream. Laura said it was my imagination." "It wasn't imagination," Daniel said gently. "It was real. You and me and Taro. That was our life." Ethan stared at the table for a long time. Then, quietly, "I want to see the house, where I used to live." Daniel's heart skipped. "Whenever you're ready, it's still there, just like it was." They talked for almost 2 hours. Small things at first. Favorite foods. Ethan still loved macaroni and cheese, just like William had. Soccer. Daniel had never played, but he'd watch every game if Ethan wanted. School. Ethan was good at math. Daniel promised to help with homework. Then deeper things. How it felt to learn the truth. How scared Ethan was of hurting the Bennetts. How angry he felt at the people who stole him. Daniel listened. He didn't push. He answered every question honestly. When the session ended, Ethan stood up. He hesitated, then stepped forward and very quickly hugged Daniel, just for a second, but it was enough. Daniel held on lightly, afraid to squeeze too hard, afraid it might vanish. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, "for waiting." Daniel couldn't speak. He just nodded against the boy's hair. The months that followed were slow and messy and beautiful. Daniel moved to a small apartment in Concord, close enough to be there when Ethan was ready, far enough not to crowd the Bennetts. He visited twice a week at first, always with Dr. Patel or another therapist present. They played cards, watched movies, went to the park. Ethan started calling him Dad tentatively, testing the word like it might break. The Bennetts cooperated fully. They were heartbroken, but they loved Ethan enough to put his needs first. They attended joint therapy sessions. They agreed to supervised visits for as long as Ethan wanted them. Eventually, the court ruled that the adoption was invalid, forged documents, no legal consent, but the judge emphasized rehabilitation over punishment. Mark and Laura received probation and community service. They were allowed continued contact with Ethan, framed as extended family while he rebuilt his life. Ethan chose to go back to his birth name, William Hayes, not because he hated Ethan, but because he wanted to honor the boy who had been taken and the father who had never stopped searching. In the fall of 2013, William moved in with Daniel full-time. The little house on Cedar Lane in Elmwood had been waiting. Daniel had kept William's old room exactly as it was. Dinosaurs on the shelves, posters on the walls. When William walked in for the first time, he stopped in the doorway. "I remember this," he said quietly. "Not everything, but pieces." They took it day by day.
Some nights, William had nightmares, flashes of the SUV, the strangers, confusion. Daniel sat with him until the shaking stopped. Other nights, they laughed until they couldn't breathe. Old stories Daniel told about William as a toddler, new stories William shared about his life in New Hampshire. Across the alley, Margaret Cole watched from her window. She saw the boy, taller now, but still with that same thoughtful walk, carrying boxes into the house, saw Daniel ruffling his hair the way he used to, saw them sitting on the porch swing at dusk, talking quietly. One evening in late 2013, Margaret wrote another note, shorter this time. "I'm glad he's home. I'm sorry it took so long. Thank you for never giving up." She slipped it under Daniel's door at 3 a.m., same as before. Daniel found it the next morning. He read it, then crossed the alley and knocked gently on Margaret's door. She opened it, chain still on at first, then, after a long moment, removed the chain and let him in. They sat in her living room, no accusations, no anger. Daniel said simply, "Thank you, for the first note, for the second, for everything." Margaret's eyes filled. "I was a coward for 8 years. You were scared," Daniel said, "but you found courage when it mattered most. That's what counts." They didn't become close friends, but after that day, Margaret started opening her curtains wider. She waved sometimes when Daniel and William walked by. One afternoon, William even crossed the alley and brought her a plate of cookies he'd baked with Daniel. Margaret accepted them with shaking hands. In 2015, William, now 15, spoke at a national conference for families of missing children. He stood at the podium in a simple black jacket, voice steady despite the bright lights. "My name is William Hayes," he began. "I was taken from my backyard when I was 4. For almost 9 years, I lived as someone else. I had another name, another family, another life. I didn't know who I really was. But my dad never stopped looking. A stranger, a woman who saw what happened, waited 8 years, then found the courage to speak. Not in person, not with her name, but with a whisper on a street and a note on a doorstep. That was enough. If you're a parent still searching, don't stop. If you're a witness who's afraid, find your courage, even if it's late. If you're a kid living a life that doesn't feel quite right, trust that small voice inside you. The truth is waiting. I got my life back because people refuse to stay silent forever. Someone else might be waiting for the same thing." Daniel sat in the audience, tears streaming freely. Beside him, Mark and Laura Bennett held hands, invited by William himself. Across the room, Margaret Cole watched on a live stream from her living room, curtains wide open, sunlight pouring in. For the first time in over a decade, she smiled. William came home, not perfectly, not without scars, not without questions that may never fully be answered, but he came home, and somewhere out there, another child is missing, another parent is searching, another witness is silent, out of fear, out of shame, out of the weight of years. Don't give up. Don't stop looking. Don't stay quiet, because William Hayes came home after 9 years, and his story belongs to every family still hoping. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that truth can surface even after years of darkness, that courage can come late but still matter, please consider supporting the channel. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story of hope, resilience, and the people who finally speak up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone searching, someone afraid, someone who thinks it's too late. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the whisper that changes everything starts with one person finding the courage to speak.